Thank you for giving us, future scientists, the conscience that is much needed in this world.
Wow, that is beautiful and emotional.
I guess it's just taking up the challenge of each era and trying to see how you can use that challenge for teaching and learning. I invented this activity that we call crazy science, where we give students fake scientific topics and we would laugh a lot at the same time. So they are using the language, they are creating the knowledge in a fun way. And then they get this opportunity to create, and it's just awesome.
Hello, Csilla.
Hi, Luísa.
Shall I say bonjour or Sia?
You can say Sia bonjour.
Tell us a little bit about you. Where are we now today, and how did you get here?
So we're sitting in a classroom at the language department at the Faculty of Sciences in Université Paris-Saclay, so the Paris-Saclay University, which is a very big university with different kinds of schools and departments and so on.
And you're a professor here?
Yes. So I teach English and I teach intercultural communication.
Which is a great topic for lots of discussions that we will have today. How did you get to France? Because you are Hungarian, right?
Yes, I was born in Hungary. As a child, I lived in Nigeria. That was where I'd learned English.
That must have been an experience. What, do you have memories of that time?
Of course. I was in a local school, so I was the only white child in that school. And of course, when we went there, I was 7 and I couldn't speak a word of English. And the children would say, stupid Csilla, stupid Csilla. So, well, kids are always
blunt.
Blunt, absolutely. And maybe that was my first experience with intercultural communication. And I have very fond memories of that life. It was a very natural way of living. We didn't have to wear shoes when we were outside. Of course, to school we wore shoes. Yes, that was a nice period. I remember walking across the fields to the library that was about maybe 3 or 4 kilometers away. And I was 8, 9 years old and nobody had to come with me. It was safe. And I would spend my whole day reading Enid Blyton books.
Those memories, so beautiful. And do you think that was the seed to the importance of intercultural communication? Was that a moment?
I'm
sure,
you think looking back, I'm sure that might have been. I lived in the US for a year and I've been living in France for 36 years, but I first came to study. And of course, you feel different, you feel uncomfortable, and you don't really understand why you're so different, why people may make comments about your directness or the way you ask questions and so on. And it's not always easy. And I think when I became an intercultural communication trainer, and I did 2 courses, it just sort of made me aware of all these different processes that happen when you're abroad, and these invisible parts of culture that people have to deal with, and the locals are not really aware. And for me, that is really a very important purpose that I may have towards my students, just to at least make them aware that we don't communicate in the same way, we don't think in the same way, we do not solve problems in the same way. and we are all biased. And I think that is something that comes from my heart, and I really want to transmit, if I can say it that way.
That is so beautiful and so profound, and we're just starting our conversation. I can't wait to dig deeper. Tell us how you got from Hungary to France. What brought you into this country, and what brought you into the English language?
Because I was more or less fluent in English when I went back to Hungary after Nigeria to study at high school. I studied French in high school, and then I went to university. I studied to become an agricultural engineer, and I also did another degree at the same school, which was for interpretation and translation in the field of agriculture, from Hungarian to English and English to Hungarian. And at that time, not many people spoke English in Hungary. German was more common. It was a different time. It was during the communist regime. And so they needed people like us. At the time, most people spoke German because, of course, Hungary had been part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So German was more of a tradition. Everybody had to study Russian, so we all learned that was compulsory.
That was compulsory.
And then you had to choose a foreign language. So I chose French. In the middle of the 80s, when Hungary was opening up a little bit, the agriculture engineering school called Agro-Paris today offered a scholarship.
And you got the scholarship?
Not the first time, because I wasn't part of the Youth Communist Party. So they did a crash course for someone who didn't speak French. And then she went. And then the second time they sent me.
Good that you didn't give up.
Well, yeah. And so I had to do a kind of master's thesis, the equivalent of a master's thesis. At the time, it wasn't called a master's degree, but a DEA, Diplôme d'études approfondies. And I had to write my thesis in a research institute. And that was where I met my husband.
In France?
In France, yes.
So did you stay in France for love?
Well, I went back to Hungary because I had to finish my studies there. And then, yes, I came back for love, absolutely. So I started teaching in continuing education in private schools in Paris. I was the only non-native speaker there.
So you were the only English teacher that was non-native speaker of English.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So after a few years of going from contract to contract, the CV landed here. And so they took me on just as a temporary teacher. And one of my wonderful colleagues, Raphael, he explained to me how I could become a permanent, real English teacher in France. I had absolutely no knowledge of the process. And so that was how I became officially an English teacher. And then the university hired me.
How do you think your background in science influenced the way you are teaching English, or how is that an added value from your point of view?
Oh, I'm sure it has, because it really helped me develop programs, specific programs for science students. So I developed a program for Masters in Biology students that I really love. The objective is writing and presenting for science. And so obviously we work on public speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So like what students would need to do when they present at a conference, and also writing, concise academic writing. And the way I set it up, I thought, well, biology is changing so much. I just can't keep up with all the changes. So I invented this activity that we call crazy science, where we give students fake scientific topics like dolphins are the ancestors of humans, or learning foreign languages triggers weight loss.
Oh my God,
Or-
I wish that would be true.
So we have a list of such topics, and they are real fun topics. And of course, they couldn't at the time take anything from the internet. So they had to devise their own series of experiments that they would do to prove that learning foreign languages triggers weight loss, or that, I don't know, adding a polar bear gene to human beings will enhance their resistance to cold. And so they would have to set up a series of experiments. They would have to explain those experiments. They would have to explain the data they got from those experiments. And after that, we would have this kind of, question-answer time, like at science conferences. And so the other students would be asking questions. And it's great because if they study genetics, they will put all their genetics in there. If they study ecology, they will create experiments from an ecological perspective. And we would laugh a lot at the same time. So they are using the language, they are creating the knowledge in a fun way. And I think that really is what I enjoy so much at this university, is that we are really free to create our own programs and adapt our programs to the public, and we don't teach science, but we teach skills and language for science in a fun way.
That's key to success, right? Engaging with the students.
Absolutely,
in
yes.
something that they love, and at the same time, the language is just there as a tool for them
Absolutely,
to achieve.
Yes.
And you're also very into the intercultural communication field. What kind of projects are you developing in that area?
My current project is called Let's Talk, a course in intercultural communication. So it's a course where we create a common program for students online, but students are put into mixed groups. Like there would be 5, 6, 7 students from different universities in a group. They would have to set up their own video conferences and have these video calls together based on what we had designed. I also do with my students who participate in this collaborative online project. I also have depending on the class, between 20 and 30 hours of training in intercultural communication. So there we look at things like, what do we mean by culture? What are the biological and sociological aspects of bias? We look at communication strategies in different cultures. We look at value systems in different cultures. We look at how languages carry the cultural concepts. We look at conflict and working together, different working styles. And of course, it's very interesting because we have, like at our university, we have students who are studying math or biology or physics or chemistry. And on the other side, from the other universities, they may be working with people who study music or languages or medicine or history. So it is a very interdisciplinary context. So they really learn not only about the differences of certain cultural values and perceptions, but they also are confronted with different learning and problem-solving mindsets, because actually they have to create a project together. And we give them a lot of freedom. They can create a video or a poem or a play or an escape game or whatever they want, as long as it is linked to the concepts we have looked at in our classes. What they create is just awesome. We have beautiful poems, and it's about their personal perceptions of their own cultures. I remember that one of them wrote a play where there was a kind of conflictual situation between people from different cultures and how they got into the conflict and how they got out of the conflict. My students, these people are science students. We often tend to think of scientists who are very serious and they are very
focused.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then they get this opportunity to create, and it's just awesome what they create.
We don't see scientists as creative because we think creativity has to do with arts, but scientists have to be hugely creative to find solutions to their problems. And I mean, it's fascinating just to listen to the passion with what you're describing, the things that your students do. What do you learn from working with them in these projects? What have you been learning in all these years?
I learn a lot of humility from them because we all have preconceived ideas. And every time my preconceived ideas, which can be subconscious, are challenged because I discover people who don't look like the people I had imagined them to be. I also admire many of my students, as overseas students who come to France, and it's not easy. And I don't know, I had a student from Gabon, and I just saw that she was very tired. And I said, "What's going on?" And she finally told me that her government wasn't giving her the scholarship, so she was just eating once a day. And so then I contacted the science teachers and, we gave her some money and we bought some food and we sent her to the social services to help her. And these students, they are so aware of the importance of education.
Yeah.
They go through all this to get the education they want. And I think that's a very important thing for us to realize, because for us Western Europeans, education is just a given.
It's a given.
So I learn a lot from those situations, and I really admire them for their determination and their perseverance and not complaining.
It's extremely valuable, that lesson of understanding the importance of education, and even when it's a given and it's a right that we just take for granted, it's still the most important thing.
And I just hope that in our future with AI, people will still remember the importance of education, human-to-human education.
We learn with other humans.
Absolutely.
That's how we learn, because there is an emotional connection.
Absolutely,
to what we learn. And I'm very confident that the good and the new generations and people like you can help us to use AI in a positive way and just enhance learning, not take away the human factor.
It's Joel here, one of the hosts of Grow. While they're taking a quick break, it's time for a teaching tip from ELT author and trainer Jeremy Harmer. We asked Jeremy to share his top tip for keeping up with professional development.
How do you keep abreast of it? Number one, you just force yourself to try new things. You force yourself to listen to other people in the staff room, talking to other teachers, working with other teachers, discussing with other teachers, because who knows what ideas you'll get to. Yes, I do think you read professional journals. You go online, you read blog posts, you find out what other people are talking about. Number three, you go to teachers' meetings. Find places where teachers congregate. Go there and listen to other talks. Just be interested in everything, because teachers are so creative. There's so much going on. It's basically picking up, being inspired by other people's ideas. It's wonderful that. The fourth thing is talk about teaching yourself, because the moment you do that, you really have to think about what you're doing. But above all, just go for it. Go out on a limb. Try something. See what happens. It's not a teaching profession. It's a learning profession. And that's what's so incredible about it.
Such a fascinating career, and I can imagine that you have so many things that you're proud of, but what are you most proud of in your career?
Yeah, I think everything I've done during my career gave me a lot of pleasure. I think I went with the changes of my time. At the beginning of the 21st century, it was, of course, the internet and internet-based learning, online learning. So I got involved in creating exercises online. And we even created a tool called Quick Tool to create language exercises online without programming, and it's an open source tool. And actually, at the time, I was preparing students for the BULATS certification, which has been replaced by LinguaSkill. And I really thought that some of those exercises were pedagogically so sound that some of those exercises gave me ideas on how to configure this quick tool to make very original exercises. Because again, when you use online exercises, you want to make sure that they are not something you can also do on paper. Otherwise, what's the point? Except that it is distance learning. Okay. But what is it that you can do online that you couldn't do with paper? For me, that was really one of my motivations.
Okay.
I guess it's just taking up the challenge of each era and trying to see how you can use that challenge for teaching and learning.
I'm hearing that you are a person who has never been afraid of the new times and the challenges, and I'm sure you inspire your students also to have that mindset and that approach to life. And I want to ask you, as a teacher, you're always dealing with the future generations, and I'm sure you feel that they look up to you. And tell us about a moment that you had that feeling, that feeling when you are doing the right thing. Something they said, something they told you, something they did for you, or that showed that you're appreciated. Can you share with us?
I guess that is one of the main drivers of teachers, because we can't say it is the money or the salary.
No, we can't say it's the money or
yes.
the glory or...
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, of course, I've had many of those moments. And one of the most recent ones was last fall when in my intercultural communication class with students who were studying for a master's degree in biology. And in the last class, they came with a little booklet that they had designed, and each one of them had written a few words about their experience, and they gave it to me on paper.
On paper.
With some flowers, and I was very touched.
Do you want to share one of those with us?
Maybe I can read one or two. Thank you, Mrs. Ducrocq, for having made possible for us to discover so many interesting cultures, opened up our horizons, gave perspectives we could never had if it wasn't for you, made us bind to each other in a more beautiful way than we ever get to do in normal life, made me discover even things about myself, my culture, and my worldview. I hope you're aware how grateful we all are for putting enormous efforts to create this class and making it an awesome experience. I will never forget your dedication to give us a great culture experience. La science sans conscience n'est qu'une ruine de l'âme. Thank you for giving us, future scientists, the conscience that is much needed in this world.
Wow.
So, of course,
that is beautiful and emotional.
Yeah.
It's the biggest of all rewards.
Absolutely.
Csilla, it's It's beautiful. It has been an absolute pleasure meeting you and speaking to you.
Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I would also like to say thank you to the Faculty of Sciences, who has always given me the freedom to do what I believe in. And I think that is very precious.
That is very precious. And as a teacher, so many teachers have the pressure of teaching the curriculum, of getting to the objectives. And we often forget that if we're not connecting to the students, nothing is being achieved. So I'm glad you have that freedom, and I hope that you continue to inspire many more students for many more years.
Me too.
Now it's time for some quick fire questions. What's the one thing you can't live without in the classroom?
Maybe a paper handout.
Okay.
Yes, because I feel that students, when we give them something to write on, I feel in terms of what they remember is so different than when you just project something and then they leave the classroom and maybe they can only remember 10% of what they've done.
Absolutely. That's a good one. What is your worst teaching habit?
Maybe, I don't know if it's the worst, but maybe it can annoy some of my colleagues, is that I have these grids to grade. Some of my colleagues sort of feel that it locks them into something very rigid. And maybe that comes from my science background, where I need a kind of objective framework, even though we are never completely objective.
No, yeah.
So that is a question.
We like objective frameworks in Cambridge too, right? You need a scale, but then you need the world to come into that and the human side. Right? That's beautiful. What is your favorite word or phrase in the English language?
Can I give two?
Of course.
So one would definitely be, if there is a will, there is a way.
I love that one.
And the second one would be, every cloud has a silver lining. Because obviously you're going to come across obstacles when you're designing a program, when you're trying to set it up. They can be different kinds of obstacles, and you may become discouraged, but I believe you learn from that. And if you really believe in why you want to do what you want to do, then you will get there.
If you have the mindset and the framework to understand how a situation can be turned into something positive.
Sometimes it can just be luck.
Luck, yeah.
Right. True.
That's true. Well, what is your go-to snack or drink during the day?
Drink tea or herbal tea.
No coffee.
No, I never drink coffee. Yes. And an apple. I love apples.
Well, an apple a day keeps the doctor away.
Yes.
That's another phrase. You've certainly been a fantastic guest, Csilla. Really, really enjoyed speaking to you.
Thank you.